Welcome to Mi Camino, a series where we talk with UC San Diego alumni about their journey through education and beyond. Today, our guest is San Diego's Poet Laureate, Paola Capó-García, an alumni who graduated with her MFA in 2015. Paola has navigated academia as a student, high school teacher, and professor, while developing her deeply intimate yet hilariously relatable voice as a poet and writer. I'm so happy you're here today with us, Paola. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's awesome to talk to you. I know we've chatted a little bit before, but I think our audience would love to hear, how did you come to find yourself here at UC San Diego?
So I came to UC San Diego because I met a professor who still teaches here in the Lit department. I was at UC Davis from 2011 to 2013. I was getting my MA in English at UC Davis. And there was a poetry reading that evening at my friend's house, and Anna Joy Springer was the invited reader. And I loved what she read. I knew that I wanted to get a terminal degree, the MFA, because UC Davis was an MA. And in talking to her, seeing her, thinking it would be cool to study under her, and knowing that I wanted to come down to Southern California, it's the only school I applied to. And luckily I got the call that I got in from Anna Joy Springer. So it just felt very full circle and wonderful.
Maybe you can share a little bit about what it's like to be a graduate student. It's different from being an undergraduate student. And I know that you were working on your MFA. You are, of course, San Diego's Poet Laureate. And what came out of your MFA program?
I think a lot. I think my book came out of the MFA program. Some of my most special relationships with human beings came out of the program. My best editors, right? My community really of writers came out of this program. Because I did it right after another program, it felt like I was in my third year as a grad student in a row. And so I ended up doing 2.5 years here at UCSD instead of the full 3 years, because I felt ready, all right? I felt ready to sort of put that book to bed, to defend my thesis, and to sort of start my life beyond grad school. But being a graduate student here felt like getting to talk about my favorite things every day and getting to go to, writing workshops and give each other feedback, receive feedback, be exposed to writers that maybe I wouldn't have been exposed to had I not done these programs, learning from really fascinating, wonderful humans. It was also a lot of work, but in a weird way, because, you think of the bohemian lifestyle of a writer who's just sitting around writing, and you need that spaciousness, right, to really come up with your voice, to find your voice as a writer. And so I feel like I really found my voice here at UCSD. I feel like I toyed with it at UC Davis, and then here at UCSD is where I really found it. And I think that happened because of the assortment of human beings around me pushing me to reach that voice.
Well, I want to share with you that I did read your book and I loved it. And there were times when I felt like I was being a voyeur into someone's life, and it felt a little bit like, I shouldn't be reading this. I shouldn't be looking. There were times where I got pissed off because I understand the experiences of women, and there's some of your poetry relates to what is it like to be a woman in our patriarchal society? And then sometimes I laughed hysterically. And so it was a great ride for me to read your book. And I did want to ask you, the title of your book is called Clap for Me, That's Not Me. How did you come up with that title?
That was a sort of arts and crafts moment with Anna Joy Springer. I had no idea what to title a book. Titling anything feels so definitive. And I had finished the book. I had finished the poems and figured out which ones and what order I wanted them in. But a title just was not announcing itself to me. And so I went to Anna Joy's office, and I told her about this, and she's like, yeah, no, we got to title this. Time's, the clock's ticking. And so I said, no specific poem comes to mind as a stand-in for the whole book, because a lot of times it might be the title of a poem. And that just didn't feel right. And so she said, all right, let's do this. She took the whole manuscript. She had it printed out. And then she took some scissors and just hacked it up into teeny tiny little pieces and threw it on the floor of her office.
Wow.
And she said, all right, let's go digging. And so we just got on the floor and just sort of rummaged through and started to find sentences, phrases, words that were sticking out to us. And then pretty quickly into it, after sort of combining a few, I had Clap for Me and she had That's Not Me. and we put it together and we just busted out laughing. Like, it's just the one that made us laugh the most. But then when we actually pressed on it, we were like, wait a minute, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about so many of the topics of this book revolve around performativity, negation and distance of the speaker and of the voice of the speaker. And then the sort of clap for me, that's not me, the humor in it as well, and feeling like you're constantly being looked at, right? That voyeurism that you mentioned, I love that you feel that, because I want that feeling. And so the title felt perfect, and it happened in a really sort of messy, funny, really analog way. And so I fully credit Anna Joy Springer with that idea. And I saw her the other day and we were laughing, thinking about that day, just being on the floor, like scavenging.
Rummaging through pieces of paper. I love the creativity of that experience, though. It's just such a great story to share with our viewers. I would love to also talk a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? What was your family life like?
Sure. And that's huge, right? So much of what I pull from in all of my writing, specifically in this book, comes from that. So I'm from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I grew up there. I was born in the U.S., in D.C., and lived in Maryland till I was about 3 years old. My father was working in the U.S. at the time, and so my mom relocated her while she was pregnant with us. And so I was born in the States. My father passed away in a car accident when I was 3 years old, and so that's what brought my mom back to Puerto Rico to be with our family. A really large family, and so that's a wonderful thing. I'm one of 10 grandkids. I grew up with my mom, but also very much raised by my grandparents. And so, I don't know, I was constantly around people. I'm one of 3 kids. I'm the youngest. I'm very much the baby in my family. La consentida, right? And so, growing up in Puerto Rico, it's so interesting because nowadays I'm constantly trying to get back to Puerto Rico, and I feel this really deep homesickness. At the time growing up there, I couldn't wait to leave. Like, just the curiosity of what else was out there in the world. And Puerto Rico can feel also like a very homogeneous environment. And I wanted more diversity, political diversity, religious, ethnic, racial. Like, I wanted to see the rest of the world.
Right.
I watched a lot of American television growing up. I was raised by a single mother, and so TV naturally raises you in many ways, or co-raises you. And so I watched so much American television that I was really curious about the U.S. and curious about American culture. And so I was dying to get out of my house, dying to go out there and live on my own. And that's what I did when I graduated high school. I went to Syracuse University, and so that's when I moved to the United States for undergrad.
Yeah. So you became an orange, I'm going to say orange man, but orange person. Yeah.
Okay. I was a fierce orange person, still am, right?
Yeah. Fellow youngest in the family, so I totally get what you're talking about. Let's talk a little bit more about the book. What was that journey like writing it? Like, what did it feel like emotionally, mentally, physically? Like, perhaps you can share a little bit of that process.
I think that a couple words come to mind. I think for some things, closure. For other things, like just scratching the surface finally of certain things that maybe I had repressed or didn't want to talk about in the past. In other ways, it just felt nice to laugh through a poem. I think humor is so important, and oftentimes we don't relate humor to poetry.
Right.
Or I think generally speaking, when I teach it, I try to remind students no, humor is a very visceral feeling, right? Being funny, making someone laugh is like such a specific way of caring and emoting. And so, I don't know, that part felt really beautiful to laugh through it, which is just how I roll through life in general with bad things, is like, how can I laugh through this? And in other ways, it also felt like I reached the level of experimentation that I wanted to reach, that I was trying to get at when I was at UC Davis. And I wrote a book there, a version of it. And I tossed that book completely and then wrote a brand new one at UCSD. And it felt like, okay, I'm more myself now. I've arrived at this more definitive version of myself. And part of that is age, right? When I did the Davis program, I was in my early 20s. And so now being in my late 20s, doing UCSD, I just felt more grounded in who I was. And so the vocabulary, like all those things just came to me in a more peaceful way instead of feeling like I was constantly trying on voices and personalities that weren't mine. And so I think it felt good. It just felt right, and it didn't feel tortured in any way, which I think that's also a cliche about poetry, right? The sort of tortured nature of writing a poem. But for me, it felt very peaceful.
I loved how you described, you said, closure on some things, looking at some things that I hadn't looked at. And that comes across in the poems. Like when I read them, I could feel that, like, oh, this is closure. Oh, this is something that she still wants to like look at and dissect and understand. And so the way you describe it, I would just want to share, like, that's the way I experienced it when I read it. Like it feels very intimate. And that's why I use the word voyeur, because it just has a certain level of intimacy that I haven't really experienced in reading some books before and some poetry before. So, and the fact that you are a Latina, like there was common themes that I can understand from my own experiences being part of, the Latino diaspora across the world. So it was like, I get it. I understand that. And then I have a lot of female friends. And, we have cafecito and they're like talking to me about what their experiences are. So there was a lot of understanding that me putting the pieces together, conversations with friends, my experience as a Latino growing up in the United States. And it's just like, in some ways validating for me to read it. I'm obviously identify as a man, but I still had a lot of validation in there and a lot of, I think, deeper understanding and compassion for women through reading your book. So thank you for writing it. And I hope the viewers will go out and like read it, especially our young men who might be listening. I think it would be very valuable for young men to read the book.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, definitely. So, Poet Laureate of San Diego. So perhaps you can tell us, like, what is a Poet Laureate? How did you find yourself with this distinction? And what are some of the things that you're doing as Poet Laureate?
I feel like I'm still trying to figure out what Poet Laureate is. And it's an interesting thing because I'm the third one here in San Diego. The program started in 2020. Ron Salisbury, who's wonderful, he was our first Poet Laureate, but during the pandemic, right? And so the second one was also UCSD alum, Jason Magabo Perez. And I've learned so much from both of them, but specifically Jason, who has really mentored me throughout my first year and helped me and always checks in on me. He's like, how you doing? How you feeling? Do you want to like toss any ideas around? And we collaborate a lot. But being a Poet Laureate of the city, the way I always saw it from the outside, seeing around, I was like, oh, this is someone who gets to do cool poetry things in the city, right? Like broadly speaking, you get to put on events with the support of the city. You get to hit different communities, neighborhoods, audiences, and do hopefully like make poetry feel more accessible and useful to people. And that's sort of what I have found out firsthand that it is, right? I've been able to do a lot of different community events, whether those are readings, workshops, a lot of multidisciplinary events as well. That's my big passion, is how can we combine poetry with visual art in some way, right? And so planning now a video poetics workshop to offer for free to people, to write poetry and then turn it into experimental short films. How can we combine poetry with zine making? How can we combine poetry and music? And so those things are really fascinating to me, and I think actually make poetry more accessible to people. And so it's going to be 2 years of experimenting and seeing what hits, what doesn't, right? Which communities respond well, and just really trying to connect with people on just how cool poetry is. I really believe it, that I think poetry is something that gets misunderstood or mislabeled quite a bit. And a lot of people automatically say, oh, poetry is just not for me. And it's like, I just can't believe that there is a human being in this world who will not benefit from reading a really good line. Right? Who can't benefit from great language or tapping into an emotion. So I really believe that poetry is for absolutely everyone, regardless of where you come from, regardless of your educational background, it's for everyone.
It really is. And it took me a while to get there, to be perfectly honest with you, because, you grow up and you go to high school and you're reading things that were written a long time ago, and they're somewhat a little bit inaccessible. And it's not until you maybe go and you start to read poets that you want to read, that all of a sudden it becomes more real for you, and you start to understand it, you start to appreciate it. So I think it would be nice if we had more relatable poetry being taught in, high school, as opposed to something very old.
Oh, yeah. And that's my whole mission as an educator, and it has been for 14 years, is can I give you writing that sounds like you? Can I give you writing that maybe doesn't sound like you, but taps into experiences that you've had or things that you have thought? Can I give you a piece of writing from someone who grew up in your neighborhood, right? Or can I give you writing from someone who's had drastically different experiences, but somehow phrases it in a way where you can empathize in a brand new way? That to me is the magic of it. I want people to talk about a poem the same way they talk about a song. That's a banger, right? I want you to feel the same thing with a poem. That's a banger of a last line, right? That hit you in some way. And so I think part of it is let's freshen up how we talk about poetry. Let's freshen up our curriculum, and let's do away with this sort of white canon of writers, because there's still value in that, sure. And I just don't think that is what's going to hook 16, 15, 14, 17-year-old writers, even our college students. And so the more we can bring that in and show that poetry can look and sound like anything, I think the more readers we're going to have.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because I hope the young people who are listening understand that they have a voice, right? And they can put that voice in writing, and they can use that voice audibly, and it helps find yourself.
Those are the best moments as a teacher, right? When and I would always start my class, first day of school, give them the syllabus, we're talking, and then I make them a promise, and I'll say, if by the end of the semester you still don't love or even respect poetry, I'll buy you a cookie, right? And the thing I always said is I've never had to buy anyone a cookie, right? So at some point you will see this value, whether it's by reading someone else or finally writing something that you've had to process at some point in your life, but you didn't know how to. And I just think that poetry gives you that privacy and that intimacy. And I think also having a guide with you to do that, that's, I think can lead to really beautiful moments. So those are my favorite memories, is when a student who was super resistant to it initially then writes a banger poem, right? Or then writes a poem that absolutely shatters me. And you realize wow, you've needed to say that for a while and you didn't know how to.
Yeah. It can be very cathartic. Yeah, definitely.
Overflowingly so sometimes, which I think makes it intimidating to some people who don't want to talk about themselves.
Yeah, that's a excellent point. So what I'd love to chat a little bit more about is what advice you might have for young people who are contemplating going into the arts and humanities, or who are contemplating going to, a university like UC San Diego.
I see more and more, because I was a 12th grade high school teacher, I see more and more a lot of students shying away from it because they say, oh, well, I'll do those things on the side, and then I'll do something that'll make me money, right? Or I'll do something that's just that has a lot of job opportunities in their minds. And I actually believe that degrees in arts and sciences or arts and humanities really open you up to so many different kinds of jobs, right? I got my degree in journalism and also English and textual studies. I was always flagged as a good candidate everywhere because of how good of a writer I was, because of how good a communicator I was, because of how good of an editor I was. And so, maybe having an English degree seems really flimsy to a lot of people, and it opened up so many doors for me. And so I really believe that any degree that affords you the opportunity to develop yourself as a communicator will lead to a lot of diverse career options. And so I really believe do it. Also, the community that you're going to develop in these programs, I think, is really beautiful. And I think that can happen in so many programs, but there's something about arts and humanities that really pulls people together to collaborate. And so I really try to remind my students, like, you don't have to do the thing that you think will give you money, right? Do the thing that you actually want to get really, really good at, and that will open different doors. And down the line, you'll figure out a career that works for you and your family. But don't deny yourself the right and the opportunity to explore something you love just because in your mind, or because you have been told that that degree won't lead to anything.
Yeah, that's great advice. Did you find yourself with mentors here? I mean, you mentioned, Dr. Springer, but anybody else?
Ben Dollar was a great help as well when I was writing my book. Ray Armantrout, incredible writer. It was a big draw for a lot of people to come here to work with Ray Armantrout. And she did not disappoint in the sense that, like, she was a true professor, right? She gave you really incredible prompts. And so a lot of the poems you see there came out of prompts that Ray Armantrout gave me. And so I will forever be grateful to her for that. And she took very seriously giving you feedback, right? So it wasn't just she'll give you quick verbal feedback during a workshop. You'd get a typed up response on your poem. And I appreciated how seriously she took it. And so Ray was incredible. I see her all over this book. I see Ben all over this book, and I see Anna Joy as well. And then shout out to Michael Trujillo, who was also on my committee. I got to TA for Michael. I TA'd for him twice, and I loved the class. It was all about remixing and transformation of media. And we always just had great conversations about language in general. And so I included him on my committee, and yeah, he's incredible.
Well, I would really love for you to read a poem. So that our folks who are listening and viewing can get a sense of how wonderful it is.
All right, I'm going to read All of the Things. And side note, when I wrote this poem, I'm pulling from a lot of different people in this poem. But I was scared that my sister would think that it was only about her. And so I was really scared to show her this poem. And then she finally read it. She's like, I thought it was hilarious. And so I was like, okay, good, I'm absolved. But that's the hard part sometimes, sharing your work, because you don't know who's going to feel identified by it. And so, yes, sharing work with family can be tricky. But this is All of the Things. She says her time is running out. She's going to freeze those eggs. Says online dating isn't an option. Says she doesn't make enough money. She can't travel as much as she'd like. Says that she joined online dating and quit online dating. Says she got too much attention. Says no one understands. Says she's 33, cutting it close. Says her eggs are her last hope. Says she feels shackled by corporate life. She doesn't make enough money. She needs a new purse. Says she's going to try harder, going to be more positive, going to lose some weight. No one understands. Her apartment is too small. Her kitchen is too small. Says she doesn't think she's one of those people who can cook. Says she's 33 and she's cutting it close. Says New York is the problem. She can't live anywhere else. Needs to make more money. Says mom doesn't understand. Says all her friends are married. Says she's going to be more positive. She's a big girl. She can make her own decisions. Says she might need to face the facts. Says the facts are grim. Says the facts are childless, loveless, houseless. Says she's going to take charge of her life. Says it's tough out there. Her jeans don't fit anymore.
So how could our listeners learn more about all the activities that are happening for the next 2 years while you're Poet Laureate, and maybe also just learn more about opportunities to delve deeper into poetry?
Yeah, I think following the Department of Cultural Affairs for the City of San Diego on Instagram or any social media, they're constantly posting events. On my website, I'll post all of my events as well, and on my Instagram. And so many of the events are happening with local libraries. So all of my events will always be free to the public, and all ages as well. And so many events will be geared more toward children. Others will be more geared toward adults, but in general, trying to keep it open to everyone, for the next 2 years of my tenure.
Well, it's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Awesome.